Good evening to all. Uh, Today I'm here to explain you all about the continuation chapter called respiration. In the last week, we have completed the metabolism, digestion. In that, we discussed about the digestion of intracellular and extracellular digestion, along with the lipid digestion and carbohydrate digestion and the protein digestion. So now I'm here to explain you all about the respiration. Here, the respiration is the metabolic pathway where all the organisms require the oxygen for the oxidation of food materials that releases the chemical bond uh, and the complete process which is called as respiration. Here in respiration, the complex material, the complex molecules is synthesized into the smaller molecules where the releasing of carbon dioxide, water molecule and energy taken place. Here, the releasing of energy depending upon the food molecules which is going to oxidize in the presence of oxygen or in the absence of oxygen. Depending upon that categories, here the microorganisms are of two types like aerobes and anaerobes. So the releasing of more energy that indicates the aerobic respiration and releasing of less energy that shows the anaerobic respiration. The released energy which is trapped in as a ATP, which is called as the currency of the cell. The entire process which releases the carbon dioxide along with water. This is a continuous process in which the living organisms until they exist, until they end their life, continuously this process happens. The oxidation process which requires a continuous supply of oxygen, and oxygen is obtained directly by diffusion in cellular organisms. The higher animals developed various types of respiratory structures, organs like moist skin, trachea, lungs, gills, and here uh, tenidia and the lungs for absorption of oxygen from the environment. Here the respiration is the external and internal and cellular, all the uh, stages which involves in this process. In internal, in the external respiration, the gases are exchanged between the alveoli of the lungs and the blood circulation around the alveoli. And blood is the media for transporting the oxygen and the carbon dioxide in between the lungs and the tissue. In case of internal respiration, the respiration happens in between the here it is happened in the tissue level. So where the exchange of gases taken place in between the blood and the cells. In case of cellular respiration, that includes the pathways like glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport mechanism. And this is the process which involves many of the enzymes of cytoplasm and the mitochondria. So here you can see what is external, internal, and cellular respiration. This picture explains you the cellular organization of external, internal, and cellular organization. Where here you can see here the exchange happens in between the atmosphere and the lungs in case of external respiration, where the airways is took the oxygen and transport the oxygen into the internal organs. And here the internal organs called lungs and blood, the oxygen flow happens uh, from lungs to the blood. In the blood means in the internal, the transport of gases in the blood, where the conversion of the oxygen into the carbon dioxide takes taken place in the cellular respiration. From the cell, the carbon dioxide is systematically circulated from lungs to pulmonary to the lungs. From the lungs through the airways, the carbon dioxide is thrown to the environment. The next one is respiratory pigments, which are the respiratory pigments that are involved in the respiration. In case of single cell animals, uh, organisms like protozoans, the respiratory gases are directly diffused into and out of the blood body. But in the complex animals like mammals, the respiratory gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, are transported with the help of circulatory system. As just we discussed, how the circulatory system helps for the respiration. So where the blood is the circulating fluid, and here blood which contains the respiratory pigments, those are the real uh, carriers of respiratory gases. These pigments that are having a special affinity for the respiratory gases, and where the transport of gases taken place. And in case of most of the animals which containing the uh, pigments, respiratory pigments in their bloods, which have their special affinity to bind to the oxygen to increase the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. Those pigments are called as respiratory pigments. These pigments are of like, as everyone knowing, universal respiratory pigment is hemoglobin and chloroquine and hemoerythrin and hemocyanin. The first two pigments are similar with their molecular structure, which looks like the chlorophyll in the plant. The but the construction of hemoglobin is containing the iron molecule, whereas in case of chlorophyll, it containing the other molecule. So hemoglobin, it is a red, and which occurs because of the presence of heme protein. It looks like red in color. Here the heme is a iron containing pigment. So it is a complex compound which is having two separate constituents called heme and globin, which is constructed over a porphyrin ring. At the center of this ring, it consisting of iron, and this ferrous ion is combined with the globin part of the entire hemoglobin molecules. The oxygen can loosely combine with the iron molecule that remains ferrous in both the oxidized and the unoxidized combination. Each iron atom of the hemoglobin that picks up one oxygen molecule. The hemoglobin, which combines with the oxygen, is called as oxyhemoglobin, which is represented with the formula called HbO2. And the other gases which combine with the hemoglobin that produces a stable compound such as carboxyhemoglobin. And here the other classes like carbon monoxide. When the carbon monoxide is there in the blood, that forms a carboxyhemoglobin and drain off the oxygen permanently. Whenever this happens, the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood is completely going to lose, and the particular individual may get die off. This is what the carbon dioxide is considered as a poisonous and fatal gas. Hemoglobin, which is found particularly in vertebrates, uh, which is having the molecular weight of 68,000. It is looks very bright in color, bright red in color when it is oxygenated, and dark red when it is free of oxygen. In mammals, the protein make up about the 35% of the red blood cells weight. Hemoglobin that having the oxygen binding capacity of 1.34 ml oxygen per gram, which increases the total blood oxygen capacities to 7 times when comparing with the dissolved oxygen in the blood. The mammalian hemoglobin molecule that can bind up to 4 oxygen molecules. When coming to the chlorocourin, here the chlorocourin, you can see the chlorocourin in annelids, particularly in marine polychaetes, Serpulidae and Cebulidae in colloidal solution of the blood. An oxygen binding heme protein called chlorocourin is presented in the blood plasma, which is having the affinity for oxygen, is weak than hemoglobin. This is the compound which is similar to erythrocorin, which is having the molecular weight of 16 to 17 kilodalton. A myoglobin like subunits you can see in the as a chained complex of a 100 subunits with interlinking proteins that you can see in the structure of erythrocorin, chlorocourin, which exceeds their molecular weight 36,000 kilodalton. The only significant in between the chlorocourin and erythrocorin is here the chlorocourin, which carries an abnormal heme group structure, whereas and this is also having one molecule of oxygen which combines with each heme like hemoglobin, which is having a dichromatic compound, and chlorocourin is noted for appearing green in oxygenated. When it is oxygenated, it looks like a green as well as deoxygenated stage. Here you can see the differentiation in between the hemoglobin, chlorocourin, and oxyhemocyanin, and where you can see the active sites of hemerythrin before and after oxygenation. Hemoerythrin, it is not a heme protein, and which looks purple in color when it is oxygenated, and when it is deoxygenated it looks like colorless. It is in cells called coelomocytes that circulate with the coelomic fluid, Hemoerythrin, which is a protein having the molecular weight of 1 lakh, which is associated with several iron atoms. It is presented in Sipunculida and brachiopods. When coming to the hemocyanin, it is characteristic blood pigment of gastropod, cephalopod, molluscans, and it is also to be seen in crustaceans, arachnids, and Cyphysura limulus. It is also called as limulus. It is always presented colloidal solution, never enclosed in blood cells. Its molecular weight is uh, greater than 10 lakhs, and it is only the blood protein in the cephalopods. When it is oxygenated, it looks like blue in color. When it is reduced, it is colorless. The protein which carries copper atoms that combine with the oxygen, one molecule of oxygen per one atom of copper. When coming to the pinaglobin, it is look in blood brown color, which is containing the manganese and found in plasma of lamellae branch and pinna. Vanadium, it is green color pigment, has vanadium. It happens in C squares, ACDX. Erythrocorin, eryth- erythrocorin, which is found in annelids, called, which includes the earthworms. In the earthworms, it is a giant free floating blood protein containing many dozens, possibly hundreds of iron and heme bearing proteins, subunits, bound together in a single protein complex with a molecular mass greater than 3.5 million daltons. Here it is the myoglobin, which is found in the muscle tissue of many vertebrates, including human also, which gives the muscle tissue a distinct red or dark gray color. It is very similar to the hemoglobin structure and the sequence of the hemoglobin, but it is not a tetramer. Instead, it is a monomer. Because of that reason, it lacks the cooperative binding site, and it is used to store oxygen rather than the transport of oxygen. Echinochrome, it is found in sea urchins, and molpidin, which is found in Malpadia of Holothuria. So this is all about the pigments which is presented in different types of animals, cellular, unicellular and multicellular, like single-celled and multi-celled organisms. So when coming to the human respiratory system, as we know, in the human respiration, which is carried by a pair of alveoli of lungs, the system that includes the pair of external nostrils called nasopharynx, external nostrils, and also nasopharynx, epiglottis, trachea, bronchus, bronchioles. Along with that, the alveolar sac, alveoli. The external nostrils, which is open to outside environment, just above the lip, upper lip, which leads into nasal passage, where which drives into a wide nasopharyngeal chamber. It is formed by the fusion of nasal cavity and the pharynx and acts as a common passage for food and air. The nasopharynx, which opens through the epiglottis into a long and straight tube called trachea, is also known as a windpipe. Through the windpipe, uh, the windpipe which extended from neck to the mid-thorax cavity, the beginning of trachea, a cartilaginous box larynx is presented, which helps in sound production. So, called it as a sound box. In the mid-thoracic cavity, the trachea that divides into the right and left branches called preliminary bronchi. Each bronchus that divides, which forming into the secondary and tertiary bronchi and bronchioles. The terminal of the bronchiole that forms a number of very thin and irregular vascularized sac-like structures called alveolar sac. These sacs is turned and possesses the several chambers called alveoli that looks like the clusters of the grapes. The branching network of the bronchi and bronchioles, alveolar sac, and alveoli, which forms the lung system, complete lung. The lung, which is enclosed in double layered pleura with a fluid in between the two layers, which reduce the friction in between the lung surface. Depending upon the function of these systems, shows a conducting the part external nostrils, nasopharynx, epiglottis, trachea, bronchus, bronchioles, and exchanging part like alveoli sac and alveoli. The alveolus, which is the real site of gases exchange in the lungs, having the structural and functional unit of the respiratory system. In the humans, over 7,000 millions of alveoli forming the surface area about 70 to 90 meters square, which is equal to the a size of a tennis court. So alveolus is a lining where a thin wall having the squamous epithelium on its outside, a dense network called capillaries that are distributed, which are formed by splitting of pulmonary artery, which latter rejoin to form the pulmonary vein. The wall also consisting of collagen and elastic fibers, which facilitate expansion and recoiling of alveoli during the breath. The inner surface of alveoli, which always kept moist by surfactant secreted by the special cells, which plays an important role in the respiration by reducing the surface tension of the fluid layer lining of alveolus and reduces the amount of effort which needed to the inflate lungs during the breathing. It is also facilitates the faster exchange of gases in between the air and moist lining in the alveolus, where it kills the bacteria that enters lungs through the air. Here you can see the entire system as just we discussed. These are the external parts where we can consider it as a nose region, which is open to the outside, having the nasal cavity and nasal concave and nasal vestibule. So from there, it is connected to the pharynx region. From the pharynx region, here the vocal folds you can see and trachea. This box is called as vocal box. So here the larynx region containing epiglottis, thyroid cartilage and cricoid cartilage, where the trachea is open to the main bronchi. Here the main bronchi is connected to the left and right lung, where you can see the different lobes called mid lobe, inferior lobe, which connects with the diaphragm, where you can see the tracheal and bronchi rings. So here in the trachea, you can see the structure like this. The trachea, which is having a main bronchus that is segmented into the lobar branches and segmental branches, where you can see the bronchioli. And here you can see the alveolar duct and alveolus, where the real exchange of gases may take place. That is connected to the here you can see the alveolar sac in the alveoli, which is exactly looking like a branch of the grape, which is having the grapes. So altogether called as capillary beds, and which connects with the pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. So here you can see the entire structure of alveoli, and also you can see the exchange of gases. Here the bronchiole and the pulmonary arteriole and pulmonary venula, which connects with the alveoli and alveolar sac. As just we discussed, it looks like a grapes in the branch of grape tree. So here from the pulmonary artery, the oxygen enters into the uh, lung system, where the oxygen is diffused into the red blood cells. Here you can see the capillary walls, alveolar walls, and the surfactant fluid, which makes the which provides the lungs for the friction during the inhalation and exhalation. And here the releasing of carbon dioxide taken place, that is received by the pulmonary vein. So here the carbon dioxide that also diffuses into the alveolus, that is thrown into the outer environment. So this is how the exchange of gases taken place during the respiration process. Here we can see how inhalation and exhalation taken place. So yes, to start with the inspiration means inhalation, the expiration called exhalation, combinedly called as breathing, or also called as in terms of science called as pulmonary ventilation. In the inhalation, the atmospheric air is inhaled into the air, lungs due to the low pressure of the air within the lungs. In case of the expiration, exhalation, the alveolar air which is sent out from the lungs to the outer environment, where intrapulmonary pressure, which is applied higher than the external atmosphere. These two activities, which is facilitated by contraction and relaxation of the diaphragm, where you can see here, which initiate the inspiration with the expansion of the thoracic chamber, and simultaneously intercostal muscle that contract the further expansion of the thoracic chamber. This activity, which increases the volume of the lungs, and intrapulmonary pressure that decreases, and the outside air is rushes into the lungs. The relaxation of the diaphragm and intercostal, which reduces the thoracic volume, and also which is also affects the volume of the lungs, where the decrease in the volume of the lungs cause increasing into the intrapulmonary pressure, and the air is expelled out, called exhalation. The external respiration, that where the oxygen is diffuses into the blood from the alveoli, and carbon dioxide leaves the blood, enter the alveoli. This is how we already discussed, where the transported lungs are uh, oxygen which is entered into the blood, that is transported to the hemoglobin. The hemoglobin, which ready to diffuse the oxygen, and the correct carbon dioxide that is released from the lungs as a bicarbonate ions, where the circulation is continuously happens. In the internal respiration, the oxygen which is delivered to the cells, and the carbon dioxide which is released from the cells, which is taken up by the blood. The oxygen which is delivered the cells is used for the oxidation of metabolites called glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids for their energy production, so called as cellular respiration. How the transport of oxygen taken place? The respiratory gases are transported through the blood. The oxygen which diffused into the pulmonary blood in the alveoli is transported to the heart by pulmonary vein, and from heart to tissues through the systematic arteries. In the same way, the carbon dioxide which is discharged by the cells at the tissue level is transported back to the heart by systematic veins, and from heart to the lungs through the pulmonary arteries, where the oxygen is transported by the blood with the help of erythrocytes. The RBC, which containing the hemoglobin, which is a red respiratory pigment having four polypeptide chains, which is subdivided into two alpha and two beta, where each chain is associated with the heme group that binds to the molecule of oxygen, where one molecule of hemoglobin that binds to four molecules of oxygen, forming the oxyhemoglobin. About 97% of oxygen, which is transported in the form of oxyhemoglobin to the tissues, and the 3% of the 3% is transported in dissolved form in blood plasma, which is found 100 ml of blood that carries about 20.2 ml of oxygen, which forms the oxyhemoglobin, which is reversible. It dissociates easily in the tissue. Here you can see the hemoglobin, where the involvement of four oxygen molecule take in place. So once the oxygen is diffuses into the hemoglobin, blood, that forms the oxyhemoglobin. Here you can see the oxygen in the plasma, the carbon dioxide in the plasma that is diffused forms into the carbon dioxide along with the water molecule. With the help of the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, bicarbonate is formed. The formed bicarbonate that is diffused into the plasma, where the diffusion of chloride shift taken place, the balance of carbon dioxide and chlorine. Here you can see the conversion of oxyhemoglobin into oxygen, that is there where the diffusion of oxygen molecule taken place in the blood. Here it is a 6-step process in the red blood cells. So the oxyhemoglobin, which form as a respiratory surface in the alveolar capillaries. This is called oxygen loading. So when the oxygen loading happens at the tissue level, the oxyhemoglobin, which dissociate and releases the oxygen to the cells called unloading. The affinity of the oxygen to hemoglobin is explained depending upon the dissociation curve. Here you can see. So what is oxygen dissociation curve? Here the quantity of oxygen which can be held by the hemoglobin depending upon the partial pressure of the oxygen, the relationship between the oxygen and the hemoglobin, which is the ratio in between the oxygen and hemoglobin. When it represented graphically, it shows a curve called oxygen hemoglobin curve. This curve looks like a sigmoid, means S in shape, and it envisages the salient features concerning the uptake of dissociation of varying pressures of oxygen. An essential feature of oxyhemoglobin, the dissociation curve, commonly called as oxygen dissociation curve, is that hemoglobin taken up like an oxygen when partial pressure of is very high, and the oxyhemoglobin that is dissociates when the partial pressure of oxygen is low. So the hemoglobin is completely about 98% is saturated. The oxygen by an oxygen tension 100 mmHg hemoglobin, where when the oxygen tension falls below 60 hemoglobin, and oxyhemoglobin that dissociates rapidly This is indicated by the steep slope of curve at low oxygen tension, where the partial pressure of oxygen is zero, and the oxyhemoglobin that loses all its oxygen. So the hemoglobin that gets completely oxygenated in the alveoli of lungs, where you can see the oxygen tension is 100 mm, and that